Hi, I want to make a video on the idea of deprivation again. I keep covering this topic, but I just want to make sure I cover it in as many ways as possible. So I want to make another video on it, and more than likely just using real life examples to describe the problems that we're living in this world and such and so forth. So we're existing in a world, and I think a good example would be like news and watching the news. So you're watching the news, and what are you watching? You're watching problems, the very thing, the very nature of giving someone a job and describing the problems and how life works, and that's all we're doing in the news is describing problems or something based on a deprivation that we're experiencing, such as finding a cure for some kind of disease or something, and once you find the cure, it's based on a deprivation that existed to begin with, to have the gap to fill to get that cure, to reach some zero sum, and that's the problem. We're always finding different problems to fill in the gaps to make sure that we have some way to get to some kind of a relative high based on these relative negatives that we're experiencing, such as different negatives based on different experiences, how far they go, to get some relative, almost in a way trying to compensatory kind of way to compensate for it and get to some kind of high. So the news, a good way to describe the news is when you watch the news is you're giving a person a job to describe exactly the way life works is the problems. Without the problems, why would you be watching the news? That's exactly the very reason why the news exists, is because you're trying to describe problems, using those problems as an example and a way of helping yourself, using them as a sign of caution to make your life easier and make everyone else's life easier, to make sure that there are less problems to experience. And almost in a way, destroying all these problems is the only way to eliminate all these problems is by destroying the very thing from which the problem exists, and the very way the problem exists is inside of us that allow the problem. We have the nerve endings that allow pain, but without the pain, what causes life to exist, wouldn't that mean anything, and so on and so forth. The psychology, psychoses, and things like that. The problems that end up being in life is the problem. It's something that that pushes us, but the problem is the thing that pushes us towards something, but it's pushing it towards a zero sum, and the problem is the thing in the negative, and we're trying to reach some kind of sum where we're trying to reach some zero in the end. So it's giving a person a job, and we're getting off on this kind of news. Without this kind of news that's describing these problems, we're getting off on the news, such as we watch the news to make our life worth living, find some satisfaction, some gratification, some momentum, move forward to make our life worth living. And that's why we're watching the news. We almost, in a way, get high off of it. We get buzzes off of it. And trying to find life worth living is because of these problems. Watching other people's problems, making ourselves feel better about ourselves based on a deprivation that existed. Making say, man, that's good. I didn't exist. Or I don't have that person's problem. So that's why we're always trying to run away from these things. And it's about running away, and that's exactly the life game. We're about running away from problems. And that's all we're doing, is it's about running away from a deprivation, or running away from a problem, or fulfilling some kind of deprivation. So yes, we get off high off of this, and that goes on to the idea of some kind of cannibalistic thing. I mean, I know I'm regurgitating something that, someone like a Mindum says, but I watch him, so that's why I'm regurgitating some of the things, because I'm going to have some of the things. I'm going to take some of the things from the videos I've watched, because I watch him, and I'm going to put them in my videos. That's why you hear some of the same things. I'm sorry, that's too bad. Tough luck. And so that's what happens. So, yes, that's exactly the point. We're watching problems, we get off on these problems, we get off on other people's problems. That's how we look at people's problems, and we use those as examples. We look at people, we watch people failing and looking at them. We get off on it. That's exactly what makes us. We get off on drama and things like that, and that's what makes our push forward. And the idea of discovering something like an illness, like a disease, and this is back to the running away from thing. It's about disease. We're always running away from problems, or trying to satisfy some deprivation. So when we're running away from, sort of like cancer, saying you're finding a cure for a disease like cancer. So you find a cure for a disease like cancer, and when you find the disease, you take away the very thing, the very foundation, based on some negative. Why have a negative? Say, this is a good example. Why have the negative to get a positive when you could have just had nothing to begin with? Why have to go through the negative to get to a positive when you could have just had where you were in the positive to begin with? That's why it goes back to the minimizing how far you go to get the equal and opposite satisfaction, because it's the satisfaction in the end. It doesn't matter how much satisfaction you get. it leads to the same place, because it's about being the comfortable state as opposed to the satisfaction, because the satisfaction is fleeting and so on and so forth. It doesn't matter how you get to it, how much satisfaction. It's a matter of the relative position you are, and it doesn't matter how far back you go. It matters how satisfied you get in the end. And the fact that you're satisfied, or that something like that, you're satisfied, or you're in a comfortable state of mind, you're in complacency. And that's where we are when you're excited, you're looking forward to something. There's a deprivation created by some excitement that you feel, sort of like anticipation, things like that. That creates a deprivation. It's about complacency and comfort and not really feeling anything. And that's really what boils down to the point that death is the only real way to experience that complacency in the zero-sum game, because the very things that we anticipate and we desire create a deprivation in us to begin with, because when you see, you can get disappointed because it doesn't happen, and so on and so forth, because the more excited you are, the more deprivation you're going to feel once it's over, or once you're disappointed. You're more open for disappointment and then there's more room to fall down, to gratify in the end more, and when you're trying to make up for it. So that's a good way of describing something like that. So the more excited you are, you can say, oh, that's good, and that's good, I'm excited, but you're creating a deprivation. And it's almost this empty feeling, especially once you realize your desire is just a projection, and there's nothing more than touching something. It's just your finger, your peripheral nervous system, your finger touching something, and you're not mending with it, even if you were. It's just a psychology game that makes that even something register in your mind. It's a mind game. Nothing's really entering your mind, putting something in your brain. It's still just touching your brain, and the process of thinking that gives us any meaning is just a thought, projection, a movement, a jerk movement that's causing some kind of interaction. And it's nothing more, nothing less. It's very ethereal when you look at it for what it is. So... yes, I got lost in that translation in describing that. So I want to go back to the idea, and maybe I can get back to where I was, about running away from problems and something like finding a cure for disease. So back to the idea that why... So if it could be just a zero sum, which is obviously life game is a problem. Life, and by its very own nature and its very foundation, by its fundamental nature, is just a problem that we're trying to run away from. So when we're trying to experience, why have the negative? And I was talking about the minimizing the negative and the positive. So yes, minimizing the negative and the positive. Why go all the way to the negative? Just to experience a positive based on the negative that didn't need to be there to begin with. Why go through all the compensation to get a positive or satisfy deprivation or run away from a problem when the negative thing or the deprivation didn't have to be there to begin with? It's obviously there, and that's what makes the life game worth living. And without that, it wouldn't be worth living, because there's nothing going on. I'm not going to go and delve into that example or any examples in that anymore. At least not in this video. So yeah, what's the point in having it? And that's the thing. We're running away from problems, sort of like having a cure for disease. Sort of like going back to the whole idea of the news thing. We're covering problems. And sort of like, okay, well, obviously it's a good thing. We're covering a problem, we're covering a good thing, but based off of a deprivation. Even if we're finding, now we found a thing where, all the people that wish they had wings on their back are satisfying, are going to have wings. So we have a wing serum where you can grow wings. And that's obviously a positive, right? Because based on what negative? Well, the negative is the desire and the person that wants the wings. And that's positive news, but based on the deprivation, of someone wanting those things, that desire built into them. And even if the person says, oh, I didn't want wings, I wanted wings, and it just came to them, that's needed discovery. It's still a deprivation, because it's still something that they're filling in a gap in, even if it's just something they figured out now that they wanted. And it's going to fulfill some emptiness based on something else. Say it was something else, such as them not getting, not feeling good that day. Then they are not feeling some kind of deprivation. If you want something, it's based off of deprivation. Even if the deprivation is I didn't get enough sleep. If the deprivation was I didn't get enough sleep today, the satisfaction of that deprivation could be some getting wing serum on your back or something. That could satisfy the deprivation. It could be completely unrelated. From your satisfaction and the deprivation you're feeling. You can drink a lot of water and satisfy hunger, as opposed to just eating food. So that can obviously help you. It could be completely unrelated. It's about satisfying the very nature of reality, which is a deprivation, and filling that up with something. So even if you don't know it's something that you want, and all of a sudden you hear it on the news or whatever it may be, and you feel like you want it now. All of a sudden you didn't know you wanted it. Now you want it because you heard it on the news or whatever, or you just heard about it. It was based on a deprivation that you had to begin with, based on the whole life game being a deprivation. So I want to go on to another point real quick, and I want to cover maybe a couple more points. Is about the idea. I want to go back to the curing the disease thing. So when you're curing a disease, So we're running away from problems. So the very thing, such as a curing a disease, which is a positive news based on the deprivation of having the disease to begin with, which we didn't need, but it existed because that's the way reality works. But it didn't need to exist. Obviously, things are happening, but it's the very thing that makes it not worth living. If it was supposed to exist, you can look at it from that point of view, where it didn't. You don't want it to exist, and it shouldn't have existed, but it did exist, and that's no excuse for it to exist. Sort of like human beings being here, just because they're here was no excuse to do what you did to cause them to exist. They're here now. Obviously, they have to make the best of it, and there's no other way out. They're trapped. But that doesn't mean it did have to had to happen. Sort of like a disease didn't have to happen. Sort of like the thing where you had to cure the disease. It's good news, but it's based on a disease that was existing or some kind of problem or solving a problem. And that's the very thing. We're running away from problems. So when you find a disease, the thing that you're running away from is the disease. That's the thing that's giving you some kind of drive to move forward, a drive to defeat something. But once you have nothing to defeat, then it takes away from it. So and obviously it's something that didn't need to be there to begin with. So this shows that life is a very aberrant thing because it's based on this nothingness, based on something that didn't have to be there to begin with, causing problems so that some satisfaction be gleaned out of it. So that's the very foundation of the mechanism of reality, and the only way the mechanism can work. It can't exist any other way. You can't find some serum where it just makes you happy all the time and you're satisfied without any deprivation. That's the very foundation of it. Sort of like drug. That's the drug analogy I want to use. It's based on, drugs. You need so you need the high. What was the point I was trying to make? So yes, oh man, I lost track. I'm trying to get all these ideas out at once, so I apologize. So it's about the drug thing. You need so that didn't need to exist to begin with, sort of like the drug, where you need to satisfy a drug addiction based on you having the drug addiction to begin with. So, yes, you need the deprivation before you can get the satisfaction. And that's, I think, the point I was trying to make. I'm losing track and it's distracting me. I want to go back on another idea real quick about the running away from problem, like the disease thing. That's the thing that's making life worth living. But based on something that didn't need to exist to begin with. This is what happens when I'm trying to get all these ideas out at once. Notes wouldn't help me. Too many ideas at once I'm trying to explain. And so running away from problems, the thing that makes life worth living is those problems, and we're running away from those problems. And those problems are exactly the thing that makes life worth living. So that's something that drives us towards having something, but it drives us towards something. I hate forgetting things. This bothers me. And I'll have to make another video about it. So it's about running away from problems, and the disease is what makes us have some kind of worthwhile. It gives us some drive, but it's based on a disease that didn't need to happen to begin with, sort of like addiction. We're cannibalizing. All we're doing is consuming, and we're doing that to reproduce, and we're reproducing so that more things can consume, so we're reproducing and consuming, and we're addicted, and we're doing it in a closed environment, causing all sorts of things. We're getting off. The thing that makes life worth living is the thing that we're getting off of, and watching other people go through the same deprivations, and that's the thing, the drama that drives us forward, and so on and so forth. And the addiction and the cannibalism based on that. We're addicted based on this thing, based on the drug thing and the nature of reality. So that goes back to the drug analogy. Filling in a gap that didn't need to be there to begin with. So like the drug didn't need to be there to begin with. The drug addiction didn't need to be there to begin with. You need to have the drug addiction to begin with to satisfy it, and you're satisfying it only to get more drug addicted, and you need more and more and more, and so on and so forth, to satisfy the same desire. So I think, bye.